The air was thick with the sound of clinking glasses and laughter, but none of it was for me. I sat at the edge of the patio watching my family celebrate like I was just another guest who happened to show up. It was my 30th birthday, but you wouldn't have known it. There were no banners with my name, no cake waiting for me, just smiling faces gathered around someone else, raising their glasses high. For a moment, I thought maybe they had a surprise planned, something hidden just out of sight. I held on to that tiny hope the way a child clutches a balloon in the wind. I tried to smile. I tried to remind myself that it didn't matter. I was used to being the background noise in my own family. I had survived worse. Across the yard, I spotted my mother, Francine, laughing and adjusting the collar of my sister Sienna's new fiancé. My father, Edward, stood a few feet away, sipping his drink silently like he always did. Sienna, of course, looked radiant in her perfect white sundress, soaking in all the attention. Everyone had gathered for her today, and I, Adelaide Cole, Addie, the daughter who always blended into the background, sat quietly, feeling smaller than ever. I thought that would be the worst part, being forgotten again. But then the gate creaked open. A man I had never seen before stepped inside. He looked out of place in a battered leather jacket and worn boots, his face tense and searching. He scanned the crowd, passing over the dozens of faces turned toward Sienna. And then he saw me. His entire body shifted, like he had finally found what he was looking for. He walked straight toward me, his boots crunching over the gravel. The air seemed to still around us. Conversations dimmed into an awkward, humming silence. He stopped a few feet in front of me, his chest rising and falling fast. His voice cracked slightly when he spoke, but his words were clear. "You don't know me yet," he said, locking eyes with mine, "but I'm your real brother." For a moment, the world felt suspended in midair. Then, like someone had dropped a match into a dry forest, the entire party exploded into shouts, gasps, and confusion. And for the first time all day, every single person was looking at me. I woke up that morning with a strange kind of hope buzzing under my skin. It was my 30th birthday, a milestone that felt heavy with meaning even if no one else seemed to notice. I told myself it would be different this year. Maybe they had something planned, something small but thoughtful. Maybe this time they would really see me. The house smelled like fresh-cut grass and lemon polish when I came downstairs. The backyard was already transformed. Strings of pastel lights zigzagged overhead. Tables were set with floral centerpieces and gold-rimmed glasses. A 3-tiered cake sat on a long table, frosted in perfect white, though my name was nowhere on it. It was the kind of party people posted about, the kind you looked at and thought, what a beautiful family. Francine, my mother, was in the middle of it all, arranging plates with the kind of manic energy she always brought to anything involving appearances. She wore a pale yellow dress, her hair pinned neatly back, a strand of pearls around her neck. She barely glanced at me when I walked outside. "Oh, Addie, good, you're here," she said, not pausing in her work. "Help me light the candles before people start arriving." No happy birthday, no hug, just another task on her list. I moved mechanically, setting up the candles, trying not to let the familiar ache settle too deep. My father, Edward, was sitting at the patio table with his newspaper and a cup of coffee, removed from the flurry as usual. He gave me a small nod, the kind of gesture you might give a neighbor, not your daughter. By noon, the guests started trickling in. Family, friends, neighbors, people I barely knew. They hugged my mother, they shook my father's hand, they laughed and complimented the decorations. I stood to the side, smiling politely, waiting for someone to notice me. Then Sienna arrived. She floated in like a movie star, her white sundress catching the breeze, her newly manicured hand flashing a diamond ring so large it nearly blinded me. The crowd surged toward her instantly, gasping, cheering. My mother clapped her hands together, beaming with pride. "She said yes," Francine announced loudly, her voice carrying over the music. "Our Sienna is getting married." The backyard erupted in applause. I watched as people crowded around Sienna, offering congratulations, snapping pictures, laughing and crying. Plates of food were abandoned, drinks were spilled. The entire party shifted its orbit around her. I stood there, frozen, still holding a lighter in my hand. A wave of shame flushed up my spine. Maybe it had been naive to think today would be about me. Sienna had always been the sun, and I had always been the moon, visible only when she wasn't shining. It was just more obvious today under the pastel lights and perfect skies. I edged toward the dessert table, scanning for some small clue that someone had remembered. Maybe there was another cake hidden somewhere. Maybe there was a card with my name on it. But there was nothing. Only the white cake with a tiny sign stuck into the frosting that read, "Congratulations, Sienna and Blake." Cassie, my best friend since college, had called me earlier that morning. I should have listened to her. "They better go all out for you," she had said. "You deserve it." I had laughed then, brushing her off. Now, standing alone while my family celebrated without me, that laughter felt like a betrayal. I pulled out my phone and stared at Cassie's last text. "Happy 30th, Addie, I love you. Don't let them make you small today." I shoved the phone back into my pocket and blinked hard against the sting in my eyes. My mother floated past me, brushing imaginary dust off Sienna's shoulders. She didn't even notice me. I finally forced myself to walk over, weaving through the clusters of people. "Mom," I said quietly, touching her elbow. She turned, startled like she hadn't even seen me standing there. "What, Addie? Is something wrong?" I swallowed the knot in my throat. "It's my birthday," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Today's supposed to be my birthday." Francine's mouth tightened. She gave a small, almost imperceptible sigh. "Sweetheart, you're 30. You don't need a big fuss. Sienna's engagement is a once-in-a-lifetime moment. Try to be supportive." Her words hit harder than a slap. I stepped back, nodding stiffly, my heart folding in on itself. She didn't even realize how much she had hurt me. Or maybe she did and didn't care. I drifted back to the edge of the yard, clutching a plastic cup of watered-down lemonade. I watched as they passed Sienna from guest to guest like a trophy, their faces glowing with admiration. I didn't belong here. Not really. As I stood there, invisible to the people who should have loved me most, a sharp sound cut through the celebration. The creak of the old iron gate swinging open. I turned and everything began to change. The gate swung open with a low, grating sound that cut sharply through the music and laughter. I glanced toward it without thinking, expecting to see another neighbor arriving late with a bottle of wine in hand. Instead, a man stood framed by the wooden posts, a stranger who looked completely out of place. He wore a battered leather jacket despite the heat and had a guarded expression, like he was ready to bolt at the first wrong move. His hair was messy, a little too long, and his boots were dusty like he had walked across town to get here. There was something raw about him, something unsettled, like a storm gathering just out of reach. Nobody else seemed to notice him yet. They were too busy clinking glasses and snapping photos of Sienna posing with her hand splayed to show off her new diamond. I stared, feeling the air tighten around me. The man's eyes swept across the crowd once, twice, and then they locked onto me. Not past me, not near me, directly at me. I froze. Something inside me stirred, something deep and instinctive that I could not explain. Without hesitating, he started moving, straight toward me. Each step he took seemed to pull the world tighter around us. My heart pounded so loudly in my ears that I barely heard the low hum of conversation falter as people finally noticed him crossing the yard. Heads turned. Whispered questions passed between groups. Who was he? What was he doing here? The man stopped a few feet in front of me, close enough that I could see the worry etched into the lines of his face. His hands were trembling slightly, but he kept his voice steady. "You don't know me yet," he said, loud enough for the people nearest to hear, "but I'm your real brother." For a moment, nobody moved. The words seemed to hover in the thick Georgia air, heavy and unbelievable. Then chaos broke out. Guests gasped and clutched at each other. A woman near the dessert table dropped her drink. My mother's hand shot to her mouth in shock. My father rose from his chair so quickly it scraped against the stone patio. Sienna let out a sharp, disbelieving laugh, looking back and forth between me and the stranger like she was waiting for someone to yell that it was a joke. But it wasn't a joke. It couldn't be. I stared at him, trying to speak, trying to move, but my body refused. The words, "real brother," echoed in my mind, colliding with 30 years of assumptions, 30 years of lies I hadn't even known were there. My mother was the first to recover. She stepped between us, her hands raised in a placating gesture. "I don't know who you are," she said sharply. "You need to leave, now." The man's jaw tightened. He did not move. "You know exactly who I am, Francine," he said, his voice rising. "You stole her from us." A collective gasp rippled through the guests. Several people backed away, pulling out their phones, ready to record whatever was about to happen. My mother turned to me, her eyes wild and desperate. "Adelaide, listen to me," she said. "He's lying. He's trying to confuse you." But her voice was shaking. Her hands were shaking. I looked at my father, searching his face for some kind of anchor, some kind of reassurance that this was all a terrible misunderstanding. But he would not meet my eyes. He just stared down at his shoes, shame written in every line of his body. My stomach dropped. My skin prickled with cold. I turned back to the man. "What's your name?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "Eli Madden," he said. "I'm your brother. You were taken from our family when you were a baby. Our mother never stopped looking for you. I never stopped looking." The ground felt like it was tilting under my feet. I gripped the back of a chair to stay upright. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. I wanted to disappear. But something inside me, something stubborn and battered, kept me standing. I stared at my mother, the woman who had raised me, who had taught me to tie my shoes, who had packed my lunches and driven me to piano lessons. The woman who had also, apparently, built my entire life on a lie. The crowd waited, silent and expectant, all eyes on me. I felt my voice scrape its way out of my throat. "I want to know the truth." Francine's face crumpled for a brief second before she straightened her spine and lifted her chin, the mask of control snapping back into place. "There's no truth to find," she said tightly. "You are our daughter." But the words rang hollow. They fell into the heavy, accusing silence without finding purchase. Eli looked at me with a mixture of hope and heartbreak so raw that it cleaved something open inside my chest. I took a step toward him, and in that moment I made a decision that would change everything. The air around me felt sharp and thin as I took that first step toward Eli. I could feel the dozens of eyes following me, the whispered conversations swelling behind me like a rising tide. My family watched in stunned silence, frozen in place, unsure whether to pull me back or let me go. I stopped just in front of Eli. Up close, he looked even more real. His eyes, the same deep brown as mine, were red around the edges, like he had been carrying too many years of unshed tears. His hands twitched at his sides as if he wanted to reach for me but did not know if he was allowed. I opened my mouth, but the questions crowded too quickly to say just one. Instead, I asked the only thing that mattered. "How do you know?" Eli's voice was steady when he answered, but pain lived in every word. "We have the same birthmark," he said, "on our left shoulder blade, like a crescent moon. Our mom used to kiss it every night before bed and call us her moon twins. You were kidnapped from the park when you were 2. They said you drowned, but she never believed it. She searched for you until the day she died." I felt my knees weaken. I reached instinctively for the back of a nearby chair to steady myself. My mind raced through fragments of childhood memories. The strange scar I had always wondered about but was told was a surgery mark. The way my mother flinched when anyone mentioned adoption stories. The family photos that only started after I was around 3 years old. I heard my mother behind me, her voice tight and commanding. "Adelaide, this is ridiculous. That is a coincidence. This man is trying to manipulate you. Do not let him confuse you." I turned slowly to face her. Her arms were crossed tightly over her chest. Her face was pale, but her eyes still blazed with authority. She expected me to obey her. She expected me to fall in line, like I always had. For most of my life, I would have. But not today. Not after standing invisible at my own birthday party. Not after seeing the desperation and hope in Eli's face. Not after feeling the weight of every tiny moment that had never quite made sense. I let go of the chair and stood upright, my voice stronger than I thought possible. "I want to see it," I said. Francine's mouth opened, ready to protest, but I raised my hand to stop her. "I need to see it for myself." Eli nodded without hesitation. He shrugged off his jacket and pulled the collar of his t-shirt down. And there it was, a small, perfect, crescent-shaped birthmark on his shoulder blade, just like the one I had seen in the mirror my whole life. The world tilted. I pulled my own collar aside and heard the collective gasp from the guests as I revealed the identical mark on my back. Silence fell over the backyard. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. I turned slowly, scanning the faces of the people I had called family for 3 decades. My father looked away, guilt carving deep lines into his face. My mother stood rigid, her mouth tight, her hands trembling. Sienna stepped forward, her voice uncertain. "Addie, maybe there's an explanation. Maybe Mom and Dad had their reasons." Her words were meant to soothe, but they only stoked the fire rising in my chest. I met her eyes and saw for the first time that she did not understand. She had always been the one chosen, the one celebrated. She had never known what it felt like to be the afterthought, the second choice, the forgotten daughter. "There is no reason good enough for this," I said quietly. The words tasted like ash on my tongue, but they were true. I turned back to Eli. He stood there, still waiting, still offering a choice without forcing it. For the first time all day, someone was giving me the chance to decide who I was going to be. I nodded. "Let's go." Gasps rippled through the crowd. My mother called my name, a desperate plea, but I did not turn back. Eli offered me his jacket. I slipped it over my shoulders and followed him toward the gate. Every step I took felt lighter. The house, the party, the heavy expectations, all faded behind me. I did not know where the road ahead would lead, but for the first time in my life, it would be a road I chose for myself. As I stepped through the gate, I realized I had not lost a family today. I had found a piece of myself I never knew was missing, and I was not going to let anyone take it from me again. The gate slammed shut behind us, cutting off the sounds of the party like a door closing on an old life. Eli and I walked quickly down the driveway, my pulse racing so hard I could barely hear anything else. I clutched his jacket tighter around my shoulders, breathing in the unfamiliar scent of leather and something warm and real that made my throat tighten. He opened the passenger door of a battered blue pickup truck parked at the curb. I hesitated for a heartbeat, glancing back at the house where my entire life had just collapsed. People were spilling into the yard, staring after us, whispering, pointing. My mother stood frozen on the porch, her hands clenched at her sides, her face unreadable. My father remained seated at the patio table, head bowed as if the weight of his own silence had finally crushed him. I slid into the truck without another word. Eli climbed in beside me, his hands steady as he started the engine. We drove away slowly at first, then faster once we cleared the neighborhood. The farther we went, the easier it was to breathe. The sun dipped low in the sky, throwing long shadows across the road. For a while, neither of us spoke. I stared out the window, watching the houses blur past, each one a reminder of the life I had thought was mine. Finally, Eli broke the silence. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "You deserved so much better than this." I turned to him, studying the sharp set of his jaw, the sadness etched into his features. There was no performance here, no manipulation, just a brother who had lost something and spent years clawing through the dark to find it again. "You were just a kid," I said. "You didn't have a choice." He gripped the steering wheel tighter. I never stopped looking. I promised her I wouldn't. "Her?" I asked. "Our mom, Leah Madden." The name hit me harder than I expected. Leah Madden, my real mother, a woman whose face I did not remember, but whose love had apparently stretched across decades and distance to find me. Eli reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a worn photograph, folded carefully into a square. He handed it to me without speaking. I unfolded it slowly. The picture showed a young woman with dark curly hair and kind eyes, holding a chubby toddler who looked so much like me that my chest ached. There was no mistaking it. The little girl's birthmark was visible on her bare shoulder, clear as day. Tears blurred my vision. I brushed them away roughly. "She never gave up," Eli said, his voice thick. "She hired private investigators. She put up flyers even when people told her it was hopeless. She moved towns just to chase down the smallest tips. Every birthday she would bake a cake for you and light a candle. She said if you could feel her love from wherever you were, maybe it would bring you home." I pressed the photograph to my heart, feeling the weight of every missed birthday, every empty chair at a dinner table I never knew was waiting for me. "She died 2 years ago," Eli said, but I kept looking. I couldn't stop. I had to find you for both of us. The grief hit me like a punch, not just for Leah, but for all the stolen years, all the memories we could have had, the life that was ripped away before it even began. "I wish I could have met her," I whispered. "You will," Eli said. "I have her journals, letters she wrote to you. She knew she would find you. She just ran out of time." I closed my eyes, letting the warmth of those words settle over the raw places inside me. The truck pulled off onto a small overlook that faced a wide field stretching out toward the horizon. Wildflowers dotted the grass. The sun hovered just above the hills, setting the sky on fire with orange and gold. Eli cut the engine and we sat in the stillness. "You are not alone anymore, Addie," he said. "You never were." The truth of it wrapped around me like a shield. I had spent 30 years believing that love was conditional, that attention had to be earned, that being seen was a privilege given to the lucky few. And yet here was proof that love could be unconditional, fierce, relentless, that I had been wanted all along, even when I had not known it. I leaned back against the worn seat, the photo still pressed to my chest, and allowed myself to believe that maybe, for the first time, I was exactly where I was meant to be, not invisible, not forgotten, found. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in deeper shades of gold and crimson. Eli and I sat on the hood of his truck, legs swinging over the edge, quiet comfort settling between us. I traced the edges of the photograph with my fingertips, memorizing every curve of my mother's face, every shadow of the little girl I had once been. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The silence was not heavy. It was steady, like a heartbeat. A different kind of silence than the one I had grown up with. This silence was full of understanding. It asked for nothing. It simply let me be. I tilted my head back, watching the first stars prick the sky. "What happens now?" I asked finally, my voice steady. Eli smiled, a real, unguarded smile that softened the sharp lines of his face. "Now we start over," he said, "at your pace, however you want." The simplicity of it made my chest ache. No demands, no expectations, just an open road and the chance to walk it on my own terms. Eli pulled out his phone and scrolled for a second before handing it to me. A photo filled the screen, a little house with peeling paint and a bright blue door, a garden overflowing with sunflowers and tomatoes, 2 dogs sprawled across the porch like kings. "Our place," he said. "Yours too, if you want it." Tears welled up again, but this time they came from something different, something lighter. I handed the phone back, my hands trembling. "I want it," I said. For 30 years, I had lived like a guest in my own life, waiting for scraps of approval that never came. I had twisted myself into someone smaller, quieter, easier to ignore. But standing at the edge of this new beginning, I realized I did not have to be that girl anymore. I had been chosen. I had been found. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over Cassie's contact before I pressed call. She picked up immediately. "Addie, are you okay? I saw the posts. People are saying crazy things." I laughed, a real laugh that cracked open something inside me. "I am okay," I said. "Better than okay. I found my real family today." There was a pause and then her voice, full of warmth and fierce loyalty. "I always knew you were meant for something bigger than them." "I just needed a little help finding it," I said, glancing at Eli, who grinned and shrugged like it was no big deal, like he had not just dragged me out of the wreckage of my life. We hung up after a few minutes, promising to meet soon. I put my phone down and stared out over the field, the stars multiplying by the second. "I used to think love had to be earned," I said softly, "that if I just worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, maybe someday they would see me." Eli shook his head. "Love like that isn't love," he said. "It's control." The words settled into me like seeds, finding cracks I had not even realized were there. They made me feel like I was too much and not enough at the same time, I said. "All my life." "You were never the problem," Eli said. "They were." The final piece clicked into place. I had spent so long blaming myself, measuring myself against impossible standards set by people who only loved the version of me they could control. I was never broken. I was stolen. I stood up on the hood of the truck, arms stretched wide toward the endless sky. I breathed in the cool night air, the scent of wildflowers and open spaces, and let it fill every hollow part of me. "I'm not going back," I said. "Good," Eli said, laughing, "because we have a lot of birthdays to catch up on." I climbed down and leaned against the truck, feeling solid in a way I never had before. I was not just someone's afterthought. I was not the second choice. I was Adelaide Cole Madden, daughter, sister, survivor, and I was finally free. As we pulled away from the overlook, I took one last look at the town that had tried to hold me captive and smiled. It had lost its power over me. Home was no longer a place. It was not the walls I had grown up inside or the people I had spent so long trying to please. Home was a feeling. Home was knowing you were wanted without having to shrink yourself to fit inside someone else's expectations. Home was sitting next to a brother who never gave up on you, watching the stars light a path you were finally ready to follow. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly where I was going. If this story touched you the way it changed me, take a moment to think about the people in your life who have always seen you, even when you felt invisible. Family is not just who raises you, it is who chooses you, who fights for you, who reminds you that you were never too much and never not enough. Thank you for being here and listening to my story. If you felt something while watching, please like this video. Share it with someone who might need a reminder that they are never truly alone. I would love to hear your thoughts, your stories, or just your reactions, so please leave a comment below. I read every one of them. And if you want to hear more true stories about resilience, love, and finding your way back home, make sure you subscribe to the channel. There is so much more to come, and I would be honored to have you on this journey with me. See you in the next video.